What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Haven't posted in a couple weeks. That's because I was on a trip to the Dominican with a nonprofit and I needed to cut the videos for those guys first since they sent me down there before I could get to this and share my experience with you. Now before we get to the story, I want to give you the bottom line up front on volunteering in a third world country. There's three things I'll tell you. Number one, after you go volunteer on a mission trip or any kind of trip to a third world country, your perspective on the world is going to shift after that experience. And number two is that you'll find that people all across the world, no matter where, are not really all that different. And the third thing is that when you go volunteer in a third world country on one of these trips, you have to understand that you're going to be uncomfortable at least once or twice during your trip. This is not a vacation, even though you might be going to somewhere beautiful like the Dominican Republic in the Caribbean, which a lot of people go to for vacation. More than likely where you're volunteering is not going to be at the Sandals Resort. So that's the bluff. Now let me tell you a little bit about Children of the Nations, the nonprofit that I was working with. They're in more than one country around the world, but they focus on children, which I really like. And their whole goal is not just to give them medical care, but essentially to raise them, to raise these kids from an early age so that they can transform whatever nation they're in to a better, more productive, basically pull them out of the third world and into the developed world, which I think is just a really cool way of helping others around the world. So this trip was really last minute. My friend Jess basically sent me a text and she's like, "Hey Jimmy, this is probably a long shot, but what are you doing in the next 2 or 3 days? Can you potentially fly to the Dominican Republic with me and my nonprofit and shoot some videos for us that we really need?" Naturally, I said yes. So the next thing I know, I'm on a plane headed for the Dominican. I land, these two guys pick me up in a van. One of them's a translator, so he does speak English, but he's pretty shy. The other one doesn't really speak English at all. We're on a 3-hour trip headed to our destination to a city that I can't really pronounce. I'm pretty sure it's called Barcelona. And we get there and they drop me off at this kind of compound hotel place at night. I get out of the van, I grab my bags. It doesn't seem like anyone's really expecting me, which I'm not surprised since only 2 days earlier I was not even a part of this trip. Luckily there was a room for me and luckily it had air conditioning, which I was really excited about. And then the next morning I wake up and I look around and I'm actually pretty impressed at where I'm staying. It's this really nice kind of villa compound. There's a pool, they can sleep like 30 to 40 people there. Really just tropical and a nice place to stay. Now I will say that there was a wall around this compound and on top of the wall was some barbed wire, so you have this striking beauty mixed with clearly there's a little bit of a safety concern outside of these walls. Oh, and there was a guard that had a shotgun, but that didn't bother me because it's good to be safe, and I understand that sometimes where we're needed to go help and volunteer on these kind of trips is not really the safest place. So we head to the clinic, and then as soon as I arrive, I'm introduced to the majority of the surgical team that's volunteering for that week with Children of the Nations in their clinic. Now this clinic is an actual Dominican clinic, but it's also used by Children of the Nations teams that come for a week at a time, and they try to have at least one team per month. Although the whole point of this was to recruit more because they do have these gap months where they need to have a team sign up and come volunteer. So we get into it and they tell me kind of the flow of the day, and there's going to be multiple surgeries, and these people that are there are just awesome volunteers that are using their time and usually their money basically to help other people that I don't know in these other countries, but they're there to just knock out these surgeries. So they throw me in the operating rooms, and I am a little squeamish when it comes to blood, especially my own blood, but even if it's someone else's blood, I get a little lightheaded, which was not a problem when I had the camera, you know, and I'm getting the shots, I'm getting the angles, but once I got the shots and I kind of stood there for a second, especially during this one surgery where they had this like needle thing with a camera on it, and they were going inside this lady and they were cutting out these stones. And all that was fine, but then once I actually stopped filming and just kind of hung out looking for my next opportunity to get a cool shot, I started getting a little lightheaded, and I looked to my left and there was just a table full of surgical tools, and I looked to my right and it was some expensive machinery that I probably didn't want to collapse on, so I excused myself. I got all the shots anyway. So then basically I spent time in between surgeries trying to getting as much footage as possible of the clinic because we want to give a tour to newcomers that are coming that haven't seen it yet. So we knocked that out. And then I got to hang out with the optometrist, really cool guy, and he actually brought his daughter with him, and they're just seeing people left and right as fast as I can. They're getting prescriptions, they're giving out glasses if they have them. If they don't, they write down the prescription and they're gonna send glasses as soon as they can. But one of the cool things is that he actually goes out to the bates. Now the bates are these little villages sprinkled throughout the Dominican, and it's actually kind of a hard thing to understand on how they exist, because they're acknowledged, they're known that they exist. The Dominican government knows that they exist, and they know that the people there are not Dominican citizens, but they're also not Haitian citizens. So just real quick, these very poor villages, before the Western world turned to corn syrup, we essentially used sugarcane, and a lot of the sugarcane came from the Caribbean, as you probably know. Now, the Dominican Republic and Haiti don't have the best relationship because of how this went down, but essentially Haitians would come across the border and the Dominican would employ them to work in the sugarcane fields. It wasn't the best conditions, and they maybe after the industry was shut down, they just kind of left them to whatever conditions they had survived. They were essentially worker camps next to the sugarcane fields, these bates as they call them. And the descendants of these generations, these children that were born there, they're not Haitians, they're not Dominicans, so they can't go to, typically they can't go to the public health facilities, they can't go to the schools, and essentially this nonprofit has jumped in to kind of rescue them from the situation and better their lives and better the lives of future generations that are in this situation. So we're out in the bates, we went to a couple schools. Now the point of going out there is that a lot of the kids don't really have the means of getting to the clinic. So if the optometrist goes out to them, he can see and take care of a lot more people. So we're jamming out at these schools, and he's seeing kids left and right, and we're trying to basically figure out a system on, so we would have, his daughter would put up an eye chart and say, hey, can you read these numbers to me? And if they couldn't, we would say, well, they probably need to see the optometrist, they probably need glasses. That was kind of difficult to know. Do they not know their numbers? Do they not really understand what's happening? Or do they truly just have bad vision? So then we're like, well, hey, let's just make up some sort of system and process. We'll take this marker, we'll put an X on their hand. That means they need to see the doctor, because it was chaos. It was controlled chaos. These kids were just going wild, having so much fun interacting with the other volunteers that weren't medical. They did kind of figure out our system though on how we were getting them in to see the doctor.
I had a system, and I was marking the kids' hands with X's who needed to see the doctor. And then they outsmarted the system and went and got their own pens and put their own X's on their hands.
So, but there is a point I want to make about these kids, and that is that these kids were authentically happy. They were really so happy and just seemed to really enjoy themselves and be very carefree about everything, and they were thrilled to have a camera pointed at them. And it really struck me that these children that have way less than any child in the Western world can be so happy with so little. And it made me think about how sometimes children in our country are not happy with such trivial things, you know? So really, I loved every minute in the bates, the two different bates we went to, actually three. Two of them we went to a school. The third one, we were there so my friend Jessica could check up on a previous patient of hers. And I just flew the drone around. And of course, if you pull out a DJI Mavic drone, and these kids who don't have anything, they barely have clothing, which you can see in the video. When that drone came out, I had an audience very quickly. And at first I was a little like, oh geez, I'm out here with my camera equipment, with like a lot of camera equipment, and it's just me, and now I've got 10 kids surrounding me. But they really, honestly, they were just interested in what I was doing, and they just wanted to look over my shoulder and watch me fly it. And again, they were just extremely happy just to be there and try to talk to me. I don't speak any Spanish, so it was really embarrassing when I could just say, lo siento, no habla español. They looked at me like, okay, Americano, you're here to help us and you don't even speak our language. What are you doing? So that was it for essentially 2 days. I filmed the clinic, I filmed the surgical team, went to the Bates, filmed the children, did a lot of interviews with a lot of the staff, did interviews with my friend Jessica. We were on like 4 hours of sleep each night, getting all the footage, and then I was back on a plane, back headed to Florida before I even knew it. Now, like I've said a couple times, the reason I was there was to film 2 very specific videos. One was it's kind of an instructional video for what to expect when you go. And the second video was basically a recruitment video because they're trying to fill up their schedule with teams, medical staff personnel, surgeons, optometrists, ENT is actually all in the video, which I'll link in the description below. Because if by the off chance that you are a medical person and you think you'd be interested in doing something like this, you should really check out the website. It's just a super cool nonprofit, super cool team of people. Even the staff that work for the nonprofit are extremely helpful and extremely giving. And personally, I really like that this nonprofit is focused on children. So check the links in the description, go check out their website, see how you can get involved if that's something that you want to do. As always, guys, give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, if you enjoyed it. If you just stumbled upon this channel and this video and you're not subscribed, you probably should subscribe because we're all about giving you the bottom line up front on any sort of travel and adventure that we get involved in. And guess what? We've got a lot more coming up.